attempting to do another video. Hopefully I've got the camera the right way around this time and you'll be able to see everything properly. But this week I wanted to just try and show a little bit about some of the pieces that I make, and this range is my flow vase ranges, and these are probably the best selling piece that I make. I initially designed these so that they would be, I wanted to do something simple that would be good as a gift for somebody but wasn't too expensive. And it started off with the little round one just here, and the idea being that they would just be able to hold a small bunch of flowers out of the garden, either a single stem or a slightly larger bunch. So the pieces are, there's the small round, which is the one just here, and then we've got the large one again, so that from the side they're very slim, but then you can get all the different reflections on them. And then we've got the bud vase again, so that from the side, and then the large oval vase, so they just pick up all the reflections of pieces in the room where they are, and they can actually get quite a large bunch of flowers. It's quite deceptive, so you can see from the one just there, so that's got quite a nice bunch, just a few pieces out of the garden, and that's actually, they will all hold water as well, so you can see you can actually just a few little bits. And what I'm hoping to do, what we'll be doing now, is just going through the process of how I make these, so you've got a bit of an idea of the background of how the process that they actually go through to get through to these final stage. So to make the vase, I use this fly press to make the two halves that are then soldered together. So this is one of my favourite pieces of workshop equipment. I've had this one for years, and it's taken 4 people to lift it up onto this bench and to move it every time I've changed workshop or moved it about. So, and then to actually make the pieces, I use these formers, which I will show you now. So the formers that I use are cut out in Perspex. So I've got different ones for the different shaped vases, but when I'm making the more one-off pieces, I can actually just cut them out in MDF. So for example, this one here, it's actually used to make the tray, the base for this one, but also I've used it for things like for making the base for my toast rack, so it's just a good way to stamp a shape out you can then cut around. So to start with, when I'm making one of the vases, I start off with these stamped out pewter discs. So I get them all pre-cut in the right size, and then I use my former, which is just here under the press. So this is the one for my small vase, so that's placed directly under the press, and then the central column is wound up, so I can then position my pewter disc directly underneath. I'm going to just twist that round, and then I use this, which is literally, it's some vinamould rubber which I've just melted in a frying pan, so it gets a nice circle shape so that it can press onto it. You can use very hard rubbers, but those ones, the edges become quite hard angled edges, whereas the good thing with the vinamould rubber is it actually creates quite a soft curve, so it gets this nice soft curve on the edge of the vase. So got my plastic former, my piece of pewter, then just put my sheet of rubber on top, piece of wood, and then I just put a weight on top of there just so that stamps that down, and then swing that round and push that down. The thing is with pewter, because it is quite soft, you really don't want to use too much pressure because it can actually cut the pewter shape out. So, and you can see now that that's actually stamped out that shape. So then to get, obviously you need 2 parts to the vase, so to actually get the second half of the vase, you just flip the former over and then stamp the second part. So now I've got my pressed out forms, I need to put my touch mark on the piece, because obviously that's my, it's the equivalent of a sort of hallmark in silverwork. So this actually, it's my name stamp, so it's a punch, which on the end it's got Fleur engraved into it. So then each one of my pieces is marked, and so everybody obviously knows who's made it. So it's obviously only going to just go on the one side of the piece, so it's just simply striking on there. So that's on there. The touch mark itself is actually registered with the Worshipful Company of Pewterers, so that whenever a piece is made, my mark is now registered with the Pewterers Company, so anybody can go back and find my work. If in future generations a piece with my stamp on it, people would be able to find out where it came from and who I was. So once I've got the stamped piece, I then have this, it's a very basic former, but you can see it's just got a little slit in the top, so that then I can then use to put the vase actually into the former, so I can get it's, this is what I use to actually create the foot, so that the piece obviously can stand up. So once the piece is in the pewter discs in the former, I just check to make sure that the top two lines, because obviously you don't want water overflowing one side more than the other, so it needs to be straight. Then I just put a piece of wood behind the piece of pewter and simply bend it forward, so it then creates an angle, which then you can lift out, and it creates the foot. So then obviously do repeating that with the other side, so that when they're soldered together you've got a nice base for the vase to stand up on. So I've now got to solder the two halves together, so they've both got the feet, but the feet have been folded up on both sides, and it's all set up ready to solder it together. This soldering pewter, it's very similar to soldering other metals. You have a flux, you have a solder. It relies on heat for the solder to flow, and the flux obviously helps to the solder to flow through the joint evenly. The only difference really with pewter soldering is obviously it's a lot lower melting temperature, so you have to take this into account when you're actually soldering the pewter. A lot of people are frightened of doing it, but once you actually get to grips with it and you're aware of the melting temperatures and things, it's quite an easy process to do. I tend to use stick soldering when I'm doing my soldering, and a very low heat. So, and I always use one of these torches, the little handheld ones, because no matter what size piece I'm soldering, the heat's only focused on one area, so it doesn't need to be an intense heat. So you just gently heat it to get a nice temperature. When you see the flux start to bubble, you can then start to solder. So that's now started to go, and so you do that all the way around the whole piece, flipping it over to the other side, and then obviously to do the bottom, because you want it to be completely watertight when the water's in there. So I've now got the vase, it's looking more like one of my vases now, so it's all soldered together. So I just need to clean up the edges so that it's all looking like one piece of pewter and not two pieces put together. So that would, to do that, I'm just using fire. I won't do this too long because it makes quite a grating noise if I just show you briefly on this bit, but just to get rid of the solder joint. So we've got the two halves that slowly start to, as you clean them up, start to look like one. And then using it's emery stick, so it's just a piece of emery paper wrapped around a stick, so I then go over the edge with that, and then you can start to see that it gets rid of all the lines from my filing and the solder joint, so it starts to become one. So then by going around the whole piece, all the edges with that, it would then be ready to then go straight onto the polisher. So this is the final stage of the piece. This is, so my vase is now all emeried all around the edge, so it's taken down to a fine emery, so it's ready to go onto the polisher. This is the final stage, and this is obviously the bit that time needs to be spent with on it to get it right, because especially with this type of a shape, all of these surfaces and reflections, if there's any flaws in it, it makes the piece not the reflections on eye angles and things like that. And part of the whole design of this is that it's got that nice smooth surface. So I'm just going to briefly show you a little bit of this, because it's very noisy once it all gets going with the extractor and the polisher. But if I just show you a section, and you can see how the actual polisher really starts to polish up that surface. So and just turn that on. So I'm just going to clean my mop off, get rid of any old polishing compound on there, and then put in the compound on the surface, and then so you can see that's now starting to come. That's the first stage of polishing. So I go through 2 stages. I usually have the triple layer on a slightly coarser mop, and then I finish it off on a swan's down mop. So if I just show you quickly just how that one, the finish, because obviously that's the mirror finish that you want at the end. So again, just need to clean them up and then put my polishing compound on. See, obviously it's not quite there yet, but you can see how that's really started to bring up that finish. It's nowhere near there yet, it's still got a lot of work to go, but gives you an idea. So that's the vase all finished and polished now. So as you can see, it's got that nice reflected finish on it. You can pick apart everything around the room, and obviously when it's got the flowers in it as well. So that's what I was saying about it needs to, that polish really needs to be done well, because otherwise it just doesn't work well. So, and that's it. So hopefully that you found that interesting, to give you a bit of an insight into how the pieces are made. Obviously it's a bit longer than a 5-minute video, because obviously to speed through it and cut bits out, but just to give you a bit of background on it. And that's it. So I hope I managed to get through all of that without dropping it or melting it, so I'm rather pleased, and speak to you soon.